Welcome again. Welcome to the all-new Masterclass. This is a new Mastering Profit Through People series. It's everything that we're going to focus on is going to be people-based, and this is brought to you by Profit Master Global Outsourcing. My name is Paul Jantz, just in case you don't know that, and if you're joining us for the first time. And thank you again for being a part of this brand new Masterclass. Now, let me tell you a little bit about this Masterclass series. It's called Mastering Profit Through People. It's going to be everything about people. It's going to be monthly, and I'm going to have a different subject matter expert that's going to be joining us every month right here. It's on the back of a series that Richard Croker, the CEO of Profit Master, we built over the last couple of years. We built a podcast series as well. So if you wanted to go back and have a look at that, check out the Profit Master YouTube page, and you'll be able to download anything you've got to do with our podcast series that we started 2 years ago. That's also called Mastering Profit Through People. So we decided to raise the bar a little bit and take it to the next stage. And now we've got a live show. So again, to all of you guys that are joining us, and we know we've got a lot of people joining us, thank you again. Now, excuse me. A couple of weeks ago, this is a really interesting point. A couple of weeks ago, I ran a focus group. It was here in Melbourne. And I think we asked everyone there's probably about 10 firms there. And we asked people, what are your current challenges? Now, if you've got different challenges, please, you've got a chat bar there and you've got a Q&A there as well. So if you wanted to ask questions, which we will open up later on in probably about 50, 55 minutes. But if you've got any comments you want to make, use the chat bar there. Now, I don't think it's any rocket science to think what people may have said. The first challenge was people. The second challenge was people. And the third challenge was people. So it's with great pleasure that we continue to bring this to you. This new educational series, thanks to Profit Master Global Outsourcing. So we can actually continue to share ideas, thoughts, strategies, and also with our subject matter experts, key things that they're working on and they've proven that's working. So I suppose that's a critical factor to all you guys that are watching this, that, I know Jenna's going to talk about a number of different things today. And she's worked with accounting firms. She's worked with people in accounting firms. So a lot of the key elements that she's going to be sharing is going to be things that you can relate to and you can apply to your business as well. Let me just cover off quickly who Profit Master Global Outsourcing is. If you're not quite sure, you can do a quick search, jump online, which most people do nowadays. So do a search. So Profit Master provides global offshoring for profitable business processes. They're based in the Philippines. We've got the Profit Master Conference coming up soon. It's their 10-year anniversary. They've been around for quite a while. They've got a number of different firms that they work with all around the country, and they're doing a fantastic job. And again, this is another part of what Richard Croker, and it's a credit to him to say, what more could I do to provide our audience? And these are the sorts of things that we're bringing to you. So well done, Richard Croker. I'm sure you're listening and online. Now, as one of the questions we spoke about, and I spoke about just before, which is about offshoring, we're going to talk about one of the key things that Jenna's also I want to ask Jenna is, how do you treat your offshore team like you would your onshore team? So again, continue to stay with us on this one, because I know there's a number of firms out there, and I deal with a lot, and I chat to a lot of accounting firms. Some have obviously already jumped towards that offshoring piece. Some are a little bit nervous. They don't know how to jump. They don't know what to do first. They don't think, they haven't got their systems right. There's a number of different elements there. Okay, so we're going to talk about that as well. And hopefully we can provide you with some confidence to what you can do next. I mentioned her name before, so now let me introduce you to her. Jenna Paulin, welcome to our first Mastering Profit Through People series. How are you?
Good, thanks, Paul. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me today.
It is our absolute pleasure. Now, before we get into it, what are we sitting at 1:05? So that's not too bad. We've got about 50 minutes before we go to questions and wrap up. But before we get into this, how about you share a little bit about you? I know we met maybe 12 months ago at a CPA function where we were both presenting, and I learned a lot more about you. But how about you share a little bit about you as the HR expert on today's show?
Yeah, for sure. So my background, bread and butter, is HR. Like a lot of people when they leave school, no idea what they're going to do. Went and did a Bachelor of Commerce. Again, what is that? And had family in business, and they said you should do HR. As a 19-year-old, you have no idea what that is. but they said it's people, organising and management. You're really good at that. So that started my journey into the HR world. I was really lucky and fortunate to have some amazing mentors. And I spent my time learning a lot within a concise time frame. So I was an internal manager for a manufacturing company that we had sites across Australia before I decided to step out and start now, actually. So we're an outsourced HR department. So my day is all things people. So we support busy business owners with their all their HR needs. And my approach is very down to earth, practical, and simple as possible. And that's the way that we like to manage HR. It's a complex area, or it can be. And the employment landscape is known to be the most complex in the globe. So we like to keep things as simple as possible. And I guess that's just my approach to business and the way that we've developed to where we are. So I cut my teeth in the blue collar environment initially. And I think that, dealing with unions and things like that, it's very, there's no fluff, say it how it is. And that's why how we've created now actually what it is today. So yeah, that's
Brilliant,
a bit
brilliant.
about me.
And I sort of resonated a lot with the messages. I know that when you presented to our CPA group, where was that, at Cape Shank, that
Yeah.
there was a number of messages there that I really loved. And one of the things that I've always done when I've been leading a lot of businesses is, and I know we made some comments about this when we jumped online, on socials, and it was around, I've always treated my people as my number one asset in business. And I've always believed that if you can treat your people, you can retain your people, you can grow your people, they will look after your clients. And that is then how you can then grow your business. So a lot of people don't believe that, and that's okay. I'm not here to change their mind, but that's an area that I've come from, and I know that you resonated with that comment quite well.
100%, Paul, because I think if I want to grow a business, it can't all be me. I'm not the expert at everything, and without giving trust and faith in my staff to, not micromanage, let them have a go. We have a bit of a philosophy, sink or swim, but I'll never let you sink because I know you've got the capability. So you might not have your confidence, but I know you do, and we're going to back you. And so that's how we approach things. And I think it's the best way, and treat them as humans. Don't be any different because you're the boss or the employer. And I think I like to take a bit of a different, unique, fresh approach, and that's what sets us apart a little bit. And we try and instill that into our clients as well.
Yeah, brilliant. And couldn't agree more. You used the word trust there. And I think when you have children, and for those of you that are parents out there, when you have children, you've got to put trust. They're getting older, they're taking on more responsibility, and you do have to trust them, and you need to share that. But you know what, at the same time, you've got to expect that they're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. I think sometimes we expect perfection when, in my opinion, there's no such thing as perfection. That's just constant and never-ending improvement. And therefore, how do we continually learn from that and improve? Learn, mistake, improve.
Right. And I agree. I've got a bit of a saying in our business, we're not brain surgeons. We're not dealing with people's, to keep them alive. As long as you come forward, if there is an error, we're human. No one is perfect. So I just think no matter what type of business you're in, you have to treat your people, and don't take that sledgehammer approach if it's not necessary, because they'll make a mistake and they'll be happy to come forward.
Correct. Now, look, like anything, there's going to be times where you have to use the sledgehammer.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's, after a couple of times that you've spoken to people about it, and you might have to be a little bit more harsh. I've always spoken about harsh but fair. And,
Yes.
Again, you let people, to a certain degree, if that's the way they're going to continue to behave, fall on their sword. But there's sometimes you'll earn greater respect sometimes by taking that person out of the business as well. And the other team members will say, thank God that happened, because that can drive culture in the wrong direction.
Agree. 100%
All right, let's get into this. You spoke about this before, so let's talk about it's a fresh new start. I can't believe we were just chatting before we went live before, and Friday is the 1st of March. Like, what the hell has happened to the first 2 months? So we're 2 months down of our new 2024 year. Let's talk about what you believe employers, people should be focusing on for 2024?
Yeah, for sure. One of the big ones that we've seen is we need to see businesses tighten the reins from a people aspect. Now, I'm not talking about coming in and being a real hard ass. As I said before, that's not our approach. But tighten the reins, I think COVID days are done. They're over. Yes, there is a fallout that, we're still seeing on a number of things, and that return to the office, which is something that we're going to talk about later, is one of them. But as leaders of business, you need to focus on forging forward and making sure that you do focus on being that leader and don't let the employees rule the roost in terms of the direction. You have to set the tone, set boundaries, still be flexible, but create a two-way street for communication and your approach into making change. Change is a big thing. Again, we're going to talk about that. However, what we saw in 2020, 21, 22, those days are done. And now we have to set our position moving forward and really, I guess, focus on what we want to achieve as businesses, because what we've found is a lot of people are still relying on those years. We're now in 2024, which is crazy, feels like yesterday, but it wasn't. So we need to move forward on that. So that's, one of the main things. And that kind of follows into point number 2 of supporting our managers. There's statistics out there that's saying that managers are feeling really burnt out and overwhelmed because so much has been put on them with the change in the employment landscape and the demands that we're getting. So making sure that you talk to your managers and really talk to them, not have a formal conversation, but check in on a regular basis to make sure that they feel that they are supported, that they can reach out, because without good management, the underneath is not going to flow. So if your managers are about to, tip over the edge, you need to do something as their leader or the owner or the CEO to make sure that doesn't happen. Because if they do fall, your team's going to fall, and that's just going to be a flow-on effect to productivity, profit, everything else that makes an organization tick.
And I think one of the I couldn't even get that out properly. One of the critical factors to that is if you're not doing those regular check-ins, and I know there's even technology that allows you to do that now, and we might even talk about that if we've got time. Retention, think about if you lost a manager, what that would do to your business. Okay, so I know there's good managers and there's bad managers out there, but we'd like to believe that, you've got good managers there. So if they've been around there, constant communication, and that's one of the critical things, isn't it? Constant communication. So my question back to you, Jenna, is what is the ideal? You said checking on a regular basis. Is it weekly? Is it daily? Is it twice a day? What do you think?
Yeah, I think you need to adapt the approach to the certain manager. Some managers I'll tell you when I need help. Some are, no, I need that structured, whether it's weekly or fortnightly. And some need more of a softer approach. So I think as a leader, you need to support your managers, what's going to get best out of them. So I know I have direct reports, what I need to do for each one of them is slightly different. So I think you need to have your regular check-ins, but you also need to make sure that you have some type of professional development focus in the organization. And that's just not for the managers, that's for employees as well. But I think what is happening, there's a lot of performance reviews or performance appraisal or performance development process. And I do that quotation because it's quite an old school stuffy terminology, and businesses still have them in place just because, we've got to do reviews, tick and flick exercise. But it's really important that you have whatever process it is, whatever you want to call it, that it's appropriate for your business and the audience. It's adding value to your business. Otherwise, you may as well spend time on actually doing something that's going to make you some money. And B, that it adds value to the employees, that they want to be involved. So don't have this annual or quarterly question and answer or review process if you're not getting anything. If, for example, in our business, we're really big on constant communication and feedback, effective this year, we actually chucked out the performance review process. We altered it last year. it was better, but we're like, we do this daily anyway. So making sure that you have a process that is appropriate, build something to support your business. And I think if you don't have something in place, you need to think about why and what could you put in place that benefits. Now, what you put in place for your managers could be different to your employees. So it's making sure that it's tailored to what they need, which will then help by supporting the burnout, because you're going to identify things. I'd love to know, put a poll out there, who actually has a professional development or performance review process in their business. Do you have it? Does it work well? Because what we're finding is a lot of people, they do, but it's a waste of time.
Yeah, and I think, I think this is a really good challenge for everyone that's watching this. And I know we've got various types of different businesses here, but certainly the ones in the accounting industry, or actually I'll just talk in general terms because I think it's really important. The challenge I'd like to throw out to you guys as employers, and I know we've got different people that are on here, is how can you eliminate the review process, the annual review process, let's call it. Again, sitting down with accounting firms, and I know we did this calculation, the larger you are, everyone charges on time. There's a productivity rate that everyone has to recover. The amount of lost time, which then equates to lost revenue and lost profit, is phenomenal. So think about if you can work on a new strategy to eliminate it by maybe just to be fair, you do a 12-month annual review. It's usually based on because someone wants a salary increase, but you can't even remember what happened 3 weeks ago, let alone 12 months ago. So proactively think about what can I do to eliminate that? And that could be just every quarter you catch up, and every quarter, and I know I've put this in place for a number of firms. Every quarter you catch up and you work about what are the goals and the milestones they're looking to achieve for the next quarter. Then you measure that. Then you got a 90-day working plan as opposed to looking back for 12 months because we're looking in the rear view mirror. And seriously, it would equate to $8,000 to $9,000 for some firms, because depending on the amount of team members, you calculate the average fee per earner that you're missing out on. And it's a reactive process. It really is.
And I'd agree. And you say this 90-day thing. I actually had an old manager that used to say business changes every 90 days, and they're 100% right. And we've all done plans, and then you might, whether it's a business plan, a performance review plan, you look at them, and then things change. Like, our business is evolving so much, and I do that quarterly from a business perspective focus, because yearly or 3 years, it's just too much. I think society and the business world changes so much these days and so rapidly, whether that's because of technology, because of the economy, because of the employees, whatever it may be. I think it's about the now for the ideal future, but don't focus on the past. If there's issues, deal with them at the time. Don't wait for your scheduled meeting, because there's no point doing it. And when I put my HR brain on, if you're going to talk to me about an issue that occurred 4 months ago, that's not timely, and you can't actually do it legally.
100%. And sometimes, to be fair to some people, they find it difficult to, they don't like conflict. So it's an interesting one. Like, I've got to have that tough conversation with that person about X. But you're better off just ripping off the Band-Aid. Mind you, I'll go to you on this. You're the expert. What should they do if they don't like conflict?
They don't like it, recognize they don't like it, and turn to someone to get help, whether that's internal HR, a mentor, a business coach, the owner, or someone. Say, I've got this situation, because if you address the situation in a proactive manner and timely, it's going to resolve so much better than if you don't, and you let it escalate, and then you sit with the person and say, I've got 3 months worth of issues. That's so messy. And a lot of the time you can alleviate future issues by addressing it at the time. So find that person, that can coach and guide you to have that difficult conversation. We have a philosophy of coach, guide, educate. So a lot of the time as the HR experts, we won't have the difficult conversation because it's better off coming from their direct manager, but we will coach them on how to have it. We'll do, if, for example, there's a warning or follow-up note, the technical writing of that. But I want to upskill the managers to have these conversations, because no matter what people leader you are, in what industry, you always need some form of HR knowledge and confidence with people. But you don't need to know the technical side, but you need the confidence to have those discussions, or the know-how when the trigger point is, okay, we've got to address this. Don't let it get bigger.
Yeah, agree totally. And there's two things there that I just want to quickly share. So there was a 50-50 split on the poll that we just went out with. So 50% provide it, 50% don't provide it, which is interesting. Yeah, I agree. The other key thing that I'd encourage you guys to do is, if you've got team members, and because you were talking about managers just before, allow the managers to do their own reviews on their people. So again, it's about, they're the ones that are, I used to get involved in this all the time. And I'd say, no, I don't want to get involved. They answer directly to you. This is about you learning your skills. I might sit there in the background and maybe take some notes or whatever, but this is about empowering as well, isn't it?
Correct, Paul. And we get asked a lot as an outside provider. We get a lot of people say, "Oh, can you just come in and review, conduct our reviews?" I'm like, no. I could say yes and charge for it, but it's going to actually be detrimental for your business, because your employees, even if they know us, if we've got an ongoing relationship, your employees are going to be like, "Really? You know nothing about my day to day. Who are you to sit here and have this conversation, good or bad, with me?" So we will help coach and build those skills. But you're not, like you've experienced, you're not going to, and we might sit in and guide it, but you're not going to get the outcomes that they deserve if the managers aren't leading it.
I agree.
Yeah.
Let's switch
Yeah.
gears for a second and talk about the importance of, as a part of 2024, it's all about health and well-being. What's your thoughts on that?
It's a really difficult one, because health and well-being is so such a focus point and prominent in society, not just workplaces. But when it comes to workplaces, the rise on employer obligations is becoming higher and higher, which is becoming really difficult for employers and managers, because they're not experts in how to manage health and well-being, mental health, physical health, whatever, emotional, whatever it might be, but they're expected to know. And it's a lot of pressure. And as much as you say that might be your personal life, personal impacts work, work impacts personal, and it can be a mixed bag, as much as we need to separate it. However, it's really important that as an employer, you know your obligations and know the line, and also know how to identify when we might need to get an expert in. If you're an employer out there with the mindset of, I'm going to wash my hands of this, that's not going to be the right tactical approach. Your staff will leave, because your staff expect you to support them. Whether you believe it or not, it's a part of your job as being a leader or an owner of a business, the mental health side. And it's becoming more and more common. People are more happy to talk about it. It's becoming more and more legislative. We're talking internally, there's a really fine line between where this sits, HR and OH&S, because it's on both. Yeah. So it's quite a difficult one, but it's prevalent. It's not going away anywhere. And people are happy to say, I'm going to my psychology appointment, just as much as they're saying, I'm going to the chiro or I'm going to the hairdresser. It's a part of our DNA, and it's a great thing. But from a business leader, it can be a really difficult thing, because it's another thing on your caseload. It's another area that you just say one or two wrong words and can be very detrimental.
Yep, I agree.
So I think my advice is, know to recognize it, know when your employees may need help that you can't give them, and have your panels of experts or recommendations to reach out, whether that's implementing an EAP program. whether that's having, education on mental health in the workplace, whether that's having the appropriate policies in place. There's basic things that you can do as a business, like those things that are going to go a long way, and employees will respect and appreciate. I think EAP is a number one, but then it might not be appropriate for all businesses, but depending on your size and your industry and things like that. But I think you can't avoid it. You can't avoid it.
Yeah. And in today's world, it's so important to,
correct,
as you said, recognize it and talk about it. I think everyone's so much more open. Even males nowadays are a lot more open to talking about it. So
correct.
just have the conversation, obviously privately, but have the
Yes.
conversation where people feel that they can confide in you.
And be sensitive, because what I might find is a major issue in my life, you might not. So everyone has a different spectrum and line. We've recently been dealing with some mental health work cover claims. They're becoming more and more prevalent. Some good and legit, some not. And as an owner, it's really difficult and it's really heartbreaking, and can really pull you down if you know that this isn't legit. But you want to make sure that if you do get in that case, that you've done everything you possibly can.
Yes, agree. I
Yeah.
know a few firms, a few businesses in general have been struggling with a bit of, let's call it change management. I know it's an employee market out there, and as employers, we're having to do a lot more to satisfy our team members, to provide them more. It's not always about money, but there's a change management structure that needs to be thought through. What's your idea on that?
Yes, change is a constant thing, and our employees resist it. They resist it no matter if it's good change, bad change, or in the middle, because I just think people don't like change in general. My biggest advice is communicate, be open and transparent. Even if you don't have all the answers, communicate, because I think behind closed doors, physically and virtually, people know when things are up. So be open and transparent with whatever is going on. Technology is taking over some jobs. It's prevalent. It is a thing. There's no, ignoring that. Offshoring is taking over some jobs onshore for a number of reasons. Sometimes because you can't find someone onshore, or it's from a cost savings perspective. But these two elements, for example, are making changes in businesses, like it or not, it's happening. And I think it's about how you adapt to the change and how you communicate that to your staff, and take the gentle approach, because if you just rip the band-aid off, staff, again, they resist change. They're not going to like it. And if you think about what's happened over the last, 4 years, there's been so much change in people's lives. So, and I've got a bit of a saying, it's really hard to attract a good candidate. To retain them is even harder. So if you've got good employees out there, go above and beyond when you're going to implement the change, because more than likely, even if they would technically be offered, if you've taken them along the journey, they will support and be your biggest advocates.
Agree totally. And I think the one tip that I can provide to people that are listening to this as well is, if you are looking at that change process, the word I use is engage. So engage with the team. And it's almost like, sometimes there's an art to taking them on the journey. You know where you want to get them, but you don't want to tell them that we're going to do this, because most people don't like being told. But if they're engaged, what are your thoughts on this? This is what we're considering doing. What do you think?
Correct. And I had
They're
a conversation last week with a prospect client, and they were wanting to focus on their employee benefits, like build out a better program. They said, we have a pretty good culture. I said, okay, what does the employees want? Oh, I don't know. And I said, well, there's no point the leaders or us from an outsourced perspective saying, hey, let's roll this out. Why don't we go to the staff? Why don't we go to the people on the ground and actually ask them, what do you want to see out of this business? What's going to keep you here? Like you said, it's not always about the salary these days. Talking to people, if you're a mum returning to work, I know it's not about the salary. It's about the flexibility and how it can adopt into the new family life and transition. If you're done with developing your career, it's about finding the right fit for you, you know.
Yep.
So everyone's got different reasons. So I think before you make any change or implement any new process, even goes back to a performance review process. Ask your staff what they want, whether that's through verbal conversations or a simple little survey that you can send out on SurveyMonkey or something like that. But actually get their input before you make the change, because a lot of the time they're the ones that are hands-on operational, doing the work, and they've got better knowledge than you might, who's leading the rein. Now, I'm not saying you have to take on board everything they say, but I think it's really valuable to get their input before making any changes, because they'll probably tell you something that you don't know.
100%. And here's a little tip that I was lucky enough to live in London for 4 years and run a fairly large firm over there. And one of the things we created, or I created over there, was a think tank session. Now, one of my roles as the leader of the CEO of that business was to go out there, and I go out and talk to clients. And I know there's other great leaders out there that go and talk to their clients and they get feedback. Now, that feedback you bring back to the team into the think tank session and say, guys, I've been on 4 appointments this week. These are the top 4 things that our clients are telling us. What do you guys think? And that's it. You sit back and you let them work it out. Okay. So this is the great thing about that engagement process. Suddenly they're coming up with suggestions, change, which they don't realize that they're going through, but change internally, externally, of how we actually deal with that. And I think the results that we saw out of it were huge. There's nothing better than when your clients tell you that here's something that you should look at it changing, and then you go and put it to the team and you change it and they see it. Suddenly
Yes, agree.
they're being heard, you know? So all those
Yeah,
little things are so good.
yeah, they go a long way. And sometimes it can be the little 1%ers that go a long way.
100%. Yep, absolutely. And you spoke about and I know a lot of companies have moved to that, call it the offshoring, because you mentioned before that, yeah, we just don't have the skills here. And certainly whether it be the Philippines, where Profit Master is, or any other countries, Vietnam and India, obviously it's a big driver of an economy now in those particular countries. We're looking to replace onshore with offshore, which I know a number of businesses have done. How do you treat or continue to treat your offshore people, your employees, like onshore people?
Yeah, do just that. Treat them as if they were one. Forget about who's processing the payroll, whether it's an offshoring company or whatnot. Treat your offshore employees as though they are in Australia. Give them the same benefits where practical and possible, like leave legislation, all that, you know, dollars, that's kind of set. But for example, in our business, we have for our full-time staff RDO once a month. Now, I give that to our offshore. We do a company retreat once a year, and last year it was in Bali. Our offshore employee came to Bali. You know, she's coming again this year. She's coming in December to Australia to a Christmas party. Embed them within your team culturally, embed them within your processes, make sure that they follow the company processes. They have to do what their offshore company does from a compliance perspective. Try and get them to feel like they're one of your team, then they're a team member of the offshoring company. With no disrespect to the offshoring company, because they are working for you day in, day out and take direction. And so that's one of my biggest things, is treating them just as one of us, and not really thinking who's processing their payroll, because that's really all the difference that should be. Practically, I know internally we treat them exactly the same as if they were sitting in Melbourne or sitting in the Philippines. It doesn't matter, because they're still doing a job for you and they should be embedded within your culture. And I think that it doesn't take too much to do that.
I'd agree. And I know the guys at Profit Master, I know they always talk about how there's people, they're bringing people over from the Philippines to Australia to experience that. And can you imagine what that does for the team over there that, you know, may not
Oh,
have traveled outside their province, let alone coming to Australia and
it's,
then being a
yeah,
part of the team?
it's huge. Our offshore person, they went to Bali. It was the first time in June with us. She then booked a holiday on her own in September, And then she's going to Singapore next week. She'd never left the country, and we've exposed her. And this year she's going to Singapore, Bali, and Melbourne.
Yeah.
I just think it's such a rewarding thing to be able to do as well. But it should be, and it's not even giving them opportunities to travel. If that's not an option, it should be just that they are one of the employees.
Yep.
That they're treated no differently. Get them to follow the same policies, the same processes involved in team meetings, team chats, whatever it may be. Create that coffee banter as much as possible.
Which
We're a
you
fully
can do,
remote business,
which you can do
and
because we all did it when we're
yeah,
in COVID. You mentioned it before. I can remember doing wine events online, like
yeah,
as ridiculous that was. You're sitting here and you're with your little glass of wine. So there's
yeah,
no reason why you can't do that.
correct, correct. So yeah, I think you're going to get, and people offshore are very loyal. And I think you're going to go the extra mile, and they'll be around for a lot longer,
Agree.
you know.
Well, that's a key
Yeah,
thing for any employee, whether they're onshore or offshore. It's
yeah,
the
100%.
longer they're with you, the more they're embedded into the team, the
Yeah,
business.
agree,
Let's
agree.
talk about simple HR foundations. Sometimes it sort of blows me away sometimes to think that some businesses don't have the simplistic foundations. Are you okay to talk about just a couple of key foundation
Yeah,
benefits and
yeah, for sure.
the
So
value of that as well?
yeah, what we say the foundations are employment contracts, position descriptions, and the employee handbook. And why do we say? It's because the employment contract outlines all the T's and C's from a legal perspective and the relationship. So there's no disparity of what's actually happening here. It's in black and white. You've got your position descriptions, which outline the roles and responsibilities of the individual's position. So it's really clear and there's clarity. And then you've got an employee handbook, which is the 101 guide to employment, the processes, the boundaries, the policies. So if there's any, or leave, how do I submit a leave, or anything about performance management, how do I do, you reflect it back to that, the code of conduct, the values, all that type of stuff. Because if you have to have difficult conversations with individuals, if you've got those three elements in place, you're going to be in a much better position than not having them. Because the contracts, the T's and C's, the PDs are what you do, and the handbook is how you do it, and the boundaries. And making sure that you have them in place, that they're relevant for your business. The amount of clients that we have, oh, I got it off my friend's business, or Dr. Google, and then we just look at them, they're not appropriate. So make sure that these documents are tailored and robust for your business is going to go a long way.
Yeah, I think the ability to even, I'd be very surprised if most businesses don't have contracts and PDs. I suppose the key thing is with your position description, just to continually update it,
Yes.
and get a little
And
bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? Even a little bit more detailed to, don't leave it broad. For example, if you're using a CRM, don't say using a CRM, say we're looking for people with experience with HubSpot. So,
yep.
so we actually go to that next level, say, right, so HubSpot, or you mentioned MailChimp before, whatever it may be. So you can actually get a lot more clarity to the person that's obviously looking for the job, because you might base the ad based on the PD. So
Yes,
once you've got
correct.
that through, I think that's really important.
Yeah. And making sure, one of the biggest things is don't have all or any one of those three elements in the one document. So don't have the contract and PD together. Don't have all the policies in the contract. We see that time and time again, because like you said, you might have to review the position description. So much easier to do it as a standalone document than the contract. Yes, it all links up, but have them completely separate. Same with, say, like if you're in a position that you get a commission or bonus, have that independent. Tying it together can create confusion and a bit of mess.
I
So
think
I'd
for
love to know who
anyone,
has their foundations in place, because you mentioned most people do have the foundations. From our perspective, we see it's quite scary, a lot of businesses that don't actually have HR foundations in their business.
I've just thrown out a quick poll on that. While people are answering that, and thank you for everyone that's participating. the handbook's an interesting one because I sometimes feel in all the businesses that I've probably been a part of, I don't believe many have a handbook, which I think is interesting. So that's something that, what's the true value of having a handbook, do you think?
I think it creates and removes a lot of difficult conversations and awkward conversations that you might have to have in the team, because it's very clear cut. If you have to performance manage someone, you follow the process. So it is the pathway and guides you to the relationship on how things have to work practically. Some of the stuff in the handbook is legislative, for example, bullying, harassment, discrimination. Some is more best practice. So for example, if you're a business that you have company vehicles and it's applicable to most people, making sure it outlines what the obligations are in that, rather than having that unclear that if you get a parking fine, it's on you.
Yes.
Or credit card policy, and we don't put everything in a handbook. For example, say a credit card policy might be independent or it might not. It depends. So it's like, I remember speaking to an electrician once, and he's like, I'm getting all these speeding fines and parking tickets. Put a simple vehicle policy in place. It's not your obligation as the employer to pay for all this. And it makes things so much easier from a HR management perspective when matters go south, if you've got them written down, what you need to do.
Correct, especially when it comes to things like reimbursements.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Let's talk about the big one you mentioned before, good old WFH, as it's abbreviated now, or the acronym for working from home. What's your thoughts on how to make this? And obviously you work with a number of businesses, a number of different accounting firms as well. What's your thoughts on how to make this work for both parties?
Yeah, personally, I'm a big fan of the flexibility in the working from home, and I'm a testament to say it does work, because now actually has been in business just over 6 years now, and we have been 100% remote from day one. So pre-COVID times and all that. You need to make sure that you have the right communication channel set up, the right policies, the right processes, the right accountability structures in place, the right systems, the right check-ins from an operational perspective, workflow management. Everything needs to be probably a bit tighter than what it would if you're in a face-to-face, because there's not the photocopier or the coffee chats, the accidental, hey, Paul, have you done that yet? Over the office desk, or hey, go knock on your door, can I have 5 minutes? So it works well. You have to be, I guess, structured. As I mentioned, you have to trust your employees. So if you have a non-trusting mindset, it's not going to work. If you are a micromanager, it's not going to work. You need to have a culture that can be built remotely, and the leaders have to believe in it. You don't want it to be a benefit. You want it to be the norm, because if you act with your employees, oh, well, you're really lucky you get to work from home 2 days a week or 5 days, it's not actually a benefit anymore. Prospect employees are seeking it. If you don't offer it in some way, shape, or form, now not all industries you can. Some are easier than others. You can't work from home if you're a builder. But if you're processing a tax return, you probably can. Is it appropriate for graduates? Not as much. I think they need the hands-on learning, but there are ways to do it. So be creative in your thinking. Requesting staff, and I speak to a lot of firms out there that want staff in the office full-time, it's still an issue because it's not the way things are done in 2024. Unfortunately, whether you like that or not, it is the way it is. And if you want to attract good candidates and retain your existing employees, you need to be open to it, and it can be done. Yes, it might take a little bit more work, but it's definitely doable, especially in the accounting industry.
Look, I agree with you. I think, but like every approach, I don't believe it's a blanket approach. I believe, again, maybe if you haven't already started, maybe it's a way of having the conversation with your team and get them in a room and buy them some lunch. And guys, let's have a roundtable discussion and talk about, if we were to bring in a work from home policy, what could that look like? What does it look like for you guys? How important is it for you guys? Where do you think would be the challenges? Start with a conversation and an engaging conversation, as opposed to some firms I know just come down with the hammer, the sledgehammer approach again. And no, we're not doing it. Everyone's in the office. You're working 5 days a week. If you don't like it, you can leave.
Yeah.
Personally, I don't believe that's the right approach. Even if that's the end decision, it's not the right approach up front.
Yeah, and fortunately, unfortunately, the pandemic did show us that you can do it. So, from a case perspective, your case is a lot weaker than what it was, say, in 2019, unfortunately. Now, I'm not saying everyone has success during that mandated working from home, but it was doable for a lot of people, and it was mandated for a lot of people. So, we've seen a lot of clients, and I network with a lot of accountants, and they're like, nah, back in old school approach, which is really sad because they've lost staff. They're screaming out for staff. So kind of doing it to themselves. So I think you have to be it's just like adapting to technology. You have to be adaptable.
Spot on. And there's tech nowadays, whether it's Zoom like we're using now, whether it's other platforms that allow for really good team interaction. You only got to look at the tech companies that do it, and the ability to interact and make sure, again, it doesn't always need to be time-based. It can be performance-based. These are all the sort of things that sometimes, people prefer to work later at night because they're a night person rather than first thing in the morning because they're not a day person.
Yeah.
Flexibility can come into overall performance. Probably leads me into a next question I've got in terms of managing performance. So what's your thoughts on how we go about that? So managing performance, or let's call it underperforming, can sometimes be a challenge. Most leaders don't like I mentioned before, the conflict, or they struggle to deal with that conflict. How do you think we should address that?
Yeah, as we were discussing, do it in a timely manner. Don't avoid it. Now, yes, it's natural for most people to avoid conflict and difficult conversations, but if you do that, it's gonna backfire. It's gonna become harder and harder. Making sure that as a business you have a process in place. Now, some can go, what's a policy or procedure going to help? Well, it's going to help because when the employee goes, that's not fair, you can reference, I'm actually following the process that you've signed off in the handbook or in the independent policy. So you've got something to fall back on in black and white. In worst case, if you end up in the commission, that's another piece of evidence that they knew if we have to get down to this avenue, this is what it would look like. My advice is to always approach it where possible. Now, sometimes it's not going to be possible straight away because the situation doesn't warrant it, but approach it in a more informal manner before you go to the formal. Give people opportunities to improve. Unless you tell them there's something wrong, sometimes people don't know. For example, it's just a simple behavior issue or a simple, thing that they're always getting wrong. Don't get frustrated as their manager for 3 to 6 months and not say anything, and then you're just about to blow it. Tell them initially, because it can eliminate an issue from creating. So you can address. So give them time to rectify the issue. Tell them what you want. Again, reach out to a mentor, your HR department, your manager on how to have these conversations, because you want to make sure that you have them in the right manner and say the right things. Because as we've mentioned, 1 or 2 words can be a slip up. And if it does end up in, for example, a termination, which then ends up in an unfair dismissal case, you want to make sure you've done what you've done in the most appropriate way possible. So that's where having your HR foundations is really important. Your contract says you must follow the policies and procedures. Your PD says you must do X, Y, and Z as part of your employment here. And the handbook outlines what performance management will look like. So if you don't have those elements in place, you want to have a difficult conversation with me, I'll go, yeah, but why? That's not my job because I don't have a PD. That's not the process. because you don't have a performance management policy. So you can see how what we've spoken about today all ties in.
Yeah.
It's a cascading effect. And again, build the skills of your leaders from the onset to have these things, especially if you've gone from, say, an accountant to a senior manager that might manage people. You might have been a really good doer, but you've learned how to do the tax refund and the client relationship and stuff. You haven't learned how to have difficult conversations, how to manage workflow, all that. So make sure as leaders of organizations that you are equipping your managers or your next generation that's coming up with the skills and confidence with practical training. I'm not saying go and spend a lot of money on fancy courses, but give them these skills and knowledge that when matters do come up, that they can deal with conflict in a positive, confident way.
I agree. And just as far as what's your advice when there's, let's say, underperformance is taking place, you've got to have that difficult conversation. What's your advice on who else should be in that room? Because I think,
Yeah.
I know personally, I've fallen into the trap sometimes where you have that difficult conversation and it's a male to a female, and you have that conversation again because they're a direct report of yours, and then suddenly you hear some noise that there's a harassment going on, and then that's going
Yes.
to cause problems. So
Yep. Yeah. So
no doubt.
I like to say you should be able to have the informal conversation, just one-on-one. If that's already happened, it's going to the next step, or if the situation warrants, no, this is more serious and we're going to formal disciplinary straight away, always have someone else in the room.
Yep.
Always. Make sure that the documentation is key, that you invite them to a meeting. It outlines what we're going to discuss. For example, in the informal, that first step, have the conversation, go away. It might warrant you sending them an email confirming the conversation. However, send yourself that email. Dot point. Spoke to Jenna on this date, covered these points, we agreed on these actions. Send it to yourself for record keeping, or send it to your HR or your manager to put in the employee file, because record keeping is the biggest thing. When you go to that formal disciplinary, make sure that you have you and someone else as a witness. You always have to give the employee an opportunity with a support person as well. You need that backup. So don't do that because you need to. We always go, what's worst case, which isn't great, but we have to do that to protect you. Worst case scenario, you end up in the commission for wrongful dismissal. Then you want to show you've got a paper trail. You want to show that you've done the right thing. And that's how you're going to minimize your risk as much as possible, because that's what it's about, minimizing your risk.
Correct.
You'll never, even if you follow the letter of the law, you're never going to be 100% squeaky clean, because the employee can say something, whether it's right or wrong. That's the way it works.
Yep, spot on, spot on.
Yeah.
Okay, geez, we've covered a bit. We've covered a fair bit. In terms of changes coming through for 2024, can you foresee is there chatter behind closed doors around any sort of human resource management changes and timelines coming up that we need to be aware of?
Last year was really large from a change in legislative space for us, the biggest in 13 years. This year we've already seen, and you might have seen it in the media, things like the right to disconnect, more definition from casual employment, more structure for the gig economy, like the Ubers out there, stronger obligations around sexual harassment. So there is change coming from a legal perspective that got announced over recent weeks. I think the biggest thing is going to be around still finding the right people for your role. Succession planning, you've got great businesses, but you don't have a good business is if those leaders were to fall over. I had a conversation this morning. He's like, we don't have any backup. We're a 50+ head organization and we don't have the next generation. So making sure that you have that professional development like we've spoken about today. And I'm not talking about going to spend tens of thousands of dollars on fancy courses. I'm about practical real life skills, and job exposure is a big one, and make sure that you support those that feed you. So make sure that you support your managers.
Well said. What are we sitting at? 1:55. I'm just about to go and open up the Q&A. I think I've got a question already in there, which I'll come to pretty shortly. We've got about 5 minutes. If you've got any questions you'd like to ask Jenna, please do so. There's a couple of other questions coming through. I'll also throw this poll at you as well. Again, if you want help, there's a number of things that we've spoken about today. If you want to call or have a chat to Jenna, I'm going to launch this now. If you want to, there's a yes, thank you, or a no, thank you. Participate if you wish to. It's more just to give her a bit of an idea. If you want a phone call, Jenna will give you a call. There's no problems about that, to talk to you about anything that you would like. All right, let's go to some questions. I'll leave that open and move to that. Questions. Who should be in the room during that conversation, or could it be anyone? Good question, Claire.
Yeah, really good question. So if it's that formal disciplinary, I would say definitely have the manager of the employee, because if they're not there, that's not fair to the employee, and they're the ones that know the situation. If you have a HR department, have a HR representative. If you don't, and you've got outsourced, potentially them, or another leader in the organisation. That might be your manager, depending on how big you are. Don't have a peer of an employee. Make sure that someone that's not going to create conflict, and that person that is there knows that it's a confidential matter and not to be discussed. So ideally someone at your level or someone higher if there's no HR present. And when you must offer the employee to have a support person, that person can be of their choosing, but always having your letter inviting them, it's confidential, not to be discussed, etc. Yeah.
Next one. Hey, James. How are you, mate? How do you balance the needs of the business versus the desires of employees when determining the right policy around in office, work from home? How much consultation is too much?
Yeah, so I think, and there's a line, how much consultation can you do? At the end of the day, we are business. I would have some form of consultation, whether that's just depending on how large your business is, discussions with the team. What does the ideal scenario look like for you? Or a survey, gather the results, then compare that versus what works from an operational perspective. At the end of the day, as a leader or an owner of a business, you do have to make decisions, and they're not going to be favourable for everyone. As long as that you can show that you've consulted and you have taken on board their feedback, and when you roll out whatever position it may be, explain why you might not have been able to provide this option or that option. I don't think you have to go around and around in circles for the consultation. Have the conversation, the survey, gather the results, and then work out what is the best structure for your business. So for example, not December, just been the one before, we do an engagement survey and our team said, I want the 4-day-a-week work. We then discussed as management, how would it work? We said, okay, it would work like this. This is at the moment the way the business is. This is how it would work. We went to them and said, this is what it would look like. They then all said no. We said, we took your feedback on, you wanted the 4-day. We presented to how it would work. We've got a lot of flexibility and autonomy coming and going, but if you want 5 days in 4 days, you're going to be stuck at the computer and not as much run to the vet, run to my school concert, or whatever it may be. And they're like, no, that's fair. So they're stuck with the current structure. So it's just about communicating the why.
Yeah. Good advice. Well, thank you, Jenna, as we hit 1:59 Melbourne time over here. So what a great little session. Any final comments before we look to wrap up? That's from you, Jenna. Do you have any final comments?
Sorry, I forgot.
It's all right.
No, I think you've got to be on top of your HR. It's no longer a thing that, like, we've all got our accountant, our bookkeeper and lawyer. HR is what I say a bit newer. It is an employee world out there. Whether that's right or wrong, you need to have your ducks in a row. And so address things in a timely manner, be creative and be open to change, and consult with your staff, because as I said, 9 times out of 10, if you consult, even if you can't deliver what they want, you'll be in a better position.
I agree. Well said. And thank you to all of you guys that have joined us. Thank you. Thanks for sticking with us throughout the 1 hour. Lots of information to take away. If you've missed any of it and you want to go past it again and you want to share it with team members, this will go into post-production. It'll come out and be up on the Profit Master YouTube page. So we'll share that with you guys as well when it comes out. Thank you. Just to give you a quick little wrap up of what's happening next, my next masterclass, it is on the 14th of March. It's at 12 p.m. I'm talking about getting work to flow efficiently. So again, like we've been talking about team members here, we're going to talk about the waste that happen in a workflow process. And there's 7 key wastes. If I put up my fingers, if I can get that up. My guest is going to be Warwick Cabell. So Warwick's been around for a long time and teaching this as well. So I look forward to you guys, if you can join us. It's on the 14th of March. Invitations went out today, so look for your inbox and hopefully you can jump online and be with us on March 14. Thank you, and signing off till I see you guys all next. Thank you.